First, Prince Harry's lawsuit against the publisher of the Daily Mail and Mail has begun at the Royal Courts of Justice in London.
When the courtroom doors finally closed, the cameras didn't blink, they burned. The air wasn't filled with whispers. It was thick with prophecy. London's cold wind carried a moment that felt destined to be carved into history. Prince Harry stepped forward. No smile, no statement. Just the kind of silence that roars louder than any scream. This wasn't an exit from a building. It was the collapse of a story. A narrative he once controlled, now unraveling in front of the world. What you're watching isn't a legal hearing. It's the opening scene of a war between power and accountability. Inside those walls, tradition had no armor. Titles had no weight. Only evidence was allowed to speak, and every word cut sharper than steel. When Harry took the stand, the room seemed to stop breathing. Wooden benches, frozen pens, and eyes locked in anticipation, waiting to see whether a prince would become a man or a fortress. He carried the gravity of years on his shoulders. Headlines, rumors, late-night debates. The kind of public judgment that never clocks out. In his eyes, there was a question that hung in the air like smoke. Would anyone finally believe the pain behind the privilege? Then he spoke. His voice didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded scorched. These weren't legal points, they were scars. He turned the spotlight back on the media, holding up a mirror that reflected not just headlines, but a fractured past. He described a life turned into a spectacle, where every doorway, every phone call, every relationship became content for someone else's story. There was anger in his words, but beneath it, something far more dangerous: vulnerability. The kind rarely seen in palaces and almost never in courtrooms. Outside, the crowd waited. Inside, history leaned forward. And somewhere between the flashes of cameras and the scratching of pens, a single truth began to take shape. This wasn't just about a prince on trial. It was about a system being forced to look at itself, and not liking what it saw. The silence didn't last long. It never does. Beyond the courthouse walls, engines idled like predators in the rain. Black vehicles lined the street, windows tinted, faces hidden. This wasn't protection. This was containment. The kind reserved for moments when power feels exposed and no one is sure who's about to fall next. Inside, the judge leaned forward, fingers steepled, eyes locked on the witness stand. The question wasn't complicated, but the answer carried the weight of 1,000 consequences. Who knew? The room stiffened. Harry didn't look at the bench. He didn't look at the lawyers. He stared straight ahead, as if the future itself had taken a seat across from him. When he finally spoke, the words landed like thunder in a vacuum. More people than you think. Pens froze. A camera shutter misfired. Somewhere in the back row, a breath broke into a whisper. The statement rippled outward, invisible but unstoppable. Phones lit up across newsrooms. Producers barked orders. Editors smelled blood in the water. A story that had been simmering for years was now boiling over, and no one could turn the heat down. Behind the scenes, doors began to close. Private meetings were canceled. Invitations vanished. Names that once opened every hallway suddenly hit locked lines and unanswered emails. Power doesn't disappear quietly. It retreats into shadows and waits for the storm to pass. But the storm wasn't passing. It was just getting started. A sealed envelope was carried into the courtroom, thin, ordinary, and devastating. The kind of paper that doesn't look dangerous until you read what's printed on it. The clerk placed it on the desk. The judge opened it. The air shifted. This wasn't testimony. This was a timeline. Dates, messages, decisions. A chain of moments that connected whispers to actions and actions to consequences. Not rumors, not speculation. A map of who moved first, who followed, and who tried to pretend they were never part of the journey at all. Harry closed his eyes for half a second, just long enough to know there was no rewinding the scene. Outside, the crowd surged. The rain didn't stop them. Neither did the barriers. They pressed forward, drawn by the gravity of something bigger than celebrity, bigger than scandal. This felt like a turning point, the kind that gets mentioned years later, when people ask where you were when everything changed. Inside, the judge spoke again. This court will adjourn. But no one moved, because everyone in that room understood the truth. This wasn't an ending. It was the moment before the world found out how deep the story really went. While the city chased soundbites and camera angles, something else was already in motion. 3 floors underground, beneath a building that didn't even carry a name on its front door, a room lit up with soft blue screens and low, constant hum. No reporters, no public records, just analysts, lawyers, and people whose job was to notice patterns before the world did. A digital map spread across the main display. Lines connected cities, accounts, and identities like constellations in a sky no one was supposed to see. Each wasn't a rumor. It was a record, a signature, a transaction that left a footprint, even when it tried not to. One of the analysts leaned back in his chair and said quietly, "This isn't a scandal. It's an ecosystem." The words settled in the room, because what they were looking at wasn't a single person or a single mistake. It was a network built over years, reinforced by favors, silence, and the simple human belief that consequences always happen to someone else. Across the ocean, a private office lit up in the middle of the night. Curtains drawn, phone on speaker. A voice on the other end didn't introduce itself. It didn't have to. "They've started connecting the dots," it said. The response was just as short. "Then we moved the pieces." Documents began to vanish from shared drives. Calendars were quietly edited. Old partnerships were suddenly rebranded as brief encounters and distant associations. The language of survival isn't loud. It's careful. Back in the underground room, a new file opened. Not financial. Personal. Messages that were never meant to leave a phone. Invitations that looked harmless on the surface, but carried subtext in every line. Patterns of who showed up, who followed, and who always seemed to be one step away when things got complicated. A woman at the table exhaled slowly. This is where it stops being about money. Because money could be explained, misfiled, misunderstood, settled. This was about influence. Meanwhile, above ground, the public story took on a life of its own. Talk shows argued. Comment sections burned. Everyone picked a side, even though no one could see the full board. But in a quiet hallway far from cameras, a courier delivered a thin folder to a closed door. Inside, a list of names. Not famous, not powerful, just people who knew things at the wrong time. The door opened. The folder disappeared. The lock clicked. Somewhere else, a phone buzzed on a nightstand. One message: be careful who you trust. The story is bigger than you. The recipient read it twice. Then once more. Because for the first time, the realization hit. This wasn't about surviving a headline. It was about surviving what came after. And in the shadows, the network adjusted, waiting to see who would blink first. The office was small, unremarkable, but the air inside was electric. A single desk, a laptop, and a chair that had seen better days. Papers stacked neatly, but one folder lay open. The folder that shouldn't exist. The whistleblower leaned back, staring at the screen. Names, dates, messages. Everything that had been quietly hidden was now in one place. A mistake? Maybe. Or maybe courage. A soft knock at the door made the heart skip. The visitor wasn't expected. No badge. No introduction, just a nod and a single question. Are you ready to do this? The answer didn't come immediately. The weight of years of silence, complicity, and watching things unravel pressed down. One wrong move and the consequences would be irreversible. But the folder didn't care about hesitation. It demanded action. Emails were sent, encrypted. The right people received the right pages at the right time. Screens lit up across cities. Alerts pinged quietly in offices where the uninitiated didn't even know to look. And then the first domino fell. Above ground, the world continued to argue over headlines, unaware that the real story had already shifted. Leaks moved slower than news cycles, but faster than thought. Every action taken by the whistleblower rippled through the network, invisible yet inevitable. Back in the small office, a sigh, equal parts relief and dread. Because revealing the truth was one thing, surviving the aftermath was another. The visitor leaned in and whispered, almost to themselves, "They'll try to stop it. They always do. But now it's out." And in that moment, the whistleblower understood. The game had changed. The story was no longer about who held the pen. It was about who dared to press send. Outside, the city lights flickered. Cameras flashed. Voices argued. But behind closed doors, the real reckoning had begun. Because once the network knew the truth was moving, nothing, and no one, would be untouched. The first alerts hit social media like a shockwave. Screens across the globe blinked with messages, screenshots, and whispers. Journalists scrambled, offices buzzed, and newsrooms that had long ignored the signs suddenly realized they were part of the story. The whistleblower watched quietly, heart pounding. Notifications pinged relentlessly. Each ping was proof. The folder had moved. The truth had begun to leak. Executives on high floors of glass towers frowned at their dashboards. Analysts ran numbers frantically. PR teams drafted statements that felt already obsolete. The networks couldn't stop it. Not fast enough. Not anymore. Every secret, every hidden communication, every suppressed document now had a life of its own. Some moved in code. Some moved in whispers. Some moved in plain sight, daring anyone to act. And they did. A phone rang. A number unknown. "You need to understand they're watching," said the voice. But it didn't matter. The story had already left the office. It had escaped uncontainable. Outside, the streets were alive with speculation. Headlines were still tame, still polite. But behind the polished words, the gears were grinding. Connections that had seemed invisible were now visible. Patterns emerged. And somewhere, someone realized that control had slipped. Inside the small office, the whistleblower exhaled. Relief?
Partly.
Fear? Absolutely. Because once truth starts moving, it doesn't stop. It grows. It multiplies. Every leak, every insight, every piece of evidence sent out in those quiet hours was now a thread in a growing web. A web that would touch every office, every desk, every meeting where the hidden had been assumed safe. And the world, still unaware of the full story, was about to wake up to a revelation that no press release could contain. The dominoes were no longer in waiting. They were falling. By morning, the story had reached every corner of the globe. Social feeds exploded, headlines multiplied, and news channels ran continuous loops, trying to catch up to a truth that had already escaped the original source. Executives scrambled, calling emergency meetings that only revealed how little control they still had. Legal teams reviewed every document in panic, realizing that the leaks weren't isolated. They were systematic. Emails, contracts, and sensitive memos now floated in a digital river, visible to anyone paying attention. Public outrage grew, fed by fragments of information that painted a picture of deception, mismanagement, and deliberate concealment. Influencers, bloggers, and independent journalists added fuel to the fire, creating a feedback loop that no PR statement could douse. Inside boardrooms, accusations flew. People who had once trusted each other now whispered about betrayals and complicity. Everyone wanted a scapegoat, but no single person could contain the mess. Authority itself seemed unmoored. Meanwhile, the whistleblower watched the chaos unfold, aware of the danger but also the power of what had been unleashed. Each tweet, each article, each public reaction was validation. The walls of secrecy were cracking, and the institutions that had relied on silence now faced transparency they could neither deny nor control. For the first time in years, the balance of power had shifted. The public, armed with fragments of truth, demanded answers. Governments, corporations, and media outlets scrambled to respond, but the momentum was unstoppable. Some tried to contain it, some tried to distract, some tried to discredit the whistleblower. But in every corner, the same lesson echoed. Once information moves, it cannot be recalled. By nightfall, the impact was undeniable. What had started as a single act of courage had now become a global reckoning. And as the world adjusted to this new reality, everyone understood one truth: the age of secrecy had ended. The next steps would determine who survived, who fell, and who would rewrite the rules entirely. As the dust of the initial revelation settled, the first wave of consequences began crashing down. High-ranking officials found themselves under intense scrutiny, their private communications dissected, and their decision-making questioned. Leaks that were once whispers now became headlines, forcing resignations, suspensions, and public apologies. Corporations felt the sting as stock prices wavered, investors demanded explanations, and regulatory bodies opened investigations. Every missed detail, every hidden agreement, suddenly carried enormous weight. Those who had once acted with confidence now moved cautiously, aware that a single misstep could cost them everything. For the whistleblower, the chaos was confirmation. The strategy had worked, but with success came danger. Powerful people were not going down quietly. Threats, both subtle and overt, began to appear. Legal notices, anonymous warnings, and veiled intimidation were the price of exposing the truth. Meanwhile, the public became more restless. Protests, online campaigns, and viral discussions amplified the pressure on institutions to act. Transparency was no longer optional, it was demanded. The narrative had shifted. Those once shielded by titles, authority, or money were now vulnerable in ways they had never experienced. Inside the organizations involved, divisions deepened. Allies turned into skeptics. Teams fractured along ideological and personal lines. Fear of association grew, as anyone linked to prior decisions or cover-ups became a potential liability. And yet, for every setback, there was a calculated response. Some leaders tried to regain control through staged statements and selective disclosures. Others attempted to redirect public attention to peripheral issues. But the momentum of the truth was relentless. It had acquired its own power, independent of any single actor. By the end of the week, the landscape had shifted irrevocably. Careers were upended, reputations tarnished, and the public's appetite for accountability had been awakened. The age of secrecy was over, and the first dominoes had fallen. The stage was now set for the next phase: strategic counterattacks, institutional reforms, and the ultimate reckoning for those who underestimated the power of exposure. With the initial shockwaves still reverberating, the next phase of the battle began: calculated counterattacks. Those who had been exposed were not willing to surrender quietly. Lawyers, PR teams, and strategic advisors mobilized, crafting narratives designed to protect reputations, redirect blame, and regain control. Every statement was measured, every social media post calculated, every leak countered with selective disclosures. Behind closed doors, meetings intensified, strategies were debated, alliances tested, and contingency plans drafted. Some opted for aggressive legal action, seeking injunctions or defamation claims. Others tried subtle influence campaigns, attempting to sway public perception without drawing further attention. The tension was palpable. One wrong move could escalate the situation beyond repair. Meanwhile, those who had initiated the exposure doubled down. Evidence was cross-checked, sources reaffirmed, and communications carefully curated to withstand scrutiny. The battlefield had shifted from mere revelation to a high-stakes game of narrative control. The story was no longer just about the initial disclosures. It was about who could shape the interpretation, dominate the discussion, and ultimately claim victory in the court of public opinion. Public engagement surged. Viral debates, opinion pieces, and social media campaigns amplified every twist and turn. Citizens, activists, and journalists became both spectators and participants in a drama that had escaped the confines of private institutions. Accountability was now a spectacle, with audiences demanding transparency at every turn. At the same time, subtle fractures began appearing within the exposed institutions. Internal conflicts emerged as individuals chose sides, balancing loyalty against self-preservation. Rumors, mistrust, and speculation festered. No one was entirely safe. Each alliance was tested, and every decision scrutinized. By the end of this phase, the landscape had become a chessboard of power, strategy, and public perception. Some players had strengthened their positions, while others were teetering on the brink. The battle was far from over. The stage was now set for the ultimate confrontation, where authority, reputation, and influence would clash in ways that would redefine the rules of engagement. As the final arguments were delivered, the courtroom held its collective breath. Months of testimony, emotional outbursts, and legal maneuvering had built to this moment. The judge's expression was unreadable, but every observer could feel the weight of anticipation. For Prince Harry, this was more than a legal battle. It was the culmination of years of frustration, fear, and anger at a system he believed had wronged him. When the judgment was finally read, the outcome was clear and devastating. The majority of Harry's claims were dismissed on procedural grounds, leaving only a fraction eligible for consideration. The High Court had made its decision, and in doing so, underscored a fundamental lesson. No matter one's title, no matter one's personal suffering, the law moves according to evidence, procedure, and time, not emotion. Outside the courtroom, the media reacted immediately. Headlines varied from sympathetic accounts of a prince wronged to critical analyses of legal missteps and public spectacle. Social media exploded with commentary, dividing public opinion into supporters of Harry's fight for privacy and critics who argued that his courtroom strategy had been reckless. Financial consequences followed quickly. Under the loser pays principle, Harry faced the daunting task of covering not only his own legal fees, but also a significant portion of the newspaper's defense costs. Millions of pounds could now be drained from his personal fortune, emphasizing the stakes that had been present from the very beginning. Experts pointed out that while legal battles can uphold principles, they can also serve as costly reminders that strategy and patience often trump passion in matters of litigation. For the royal family, the case highlighted a contrast in approach. Where Prince William had quietly secured settlements, Harry's public crusade had exposed him to scrutiny, expense, and a bruised reputation. The outcome emphasized the delicate balance required to navigate public, private, and legal spheres simultaneously. Yet, the story does not end in the courtroom. Harry emerged, emotionally spent but publicly composed, facing a world that would now judge his decisions as much as his suffering. For observers, the case became a cautionary tale. Passion and principle, while admirable, must be tempered by strategy, evidence, and the harsh realities of law. As the doors closed, the lesson was undeniable. The public may sympathize, but the law does not bend to emotion. In the aftermath, Prince Harry must decide whether to continue the fight, recalibrate his approach, or step back and protect what remains, both his fortune and his peace of mind. In the end, the courtroom drama was a mirror of life itself, a collision between desire, consequence, and reality. For Prince Harry, the verdict was not just legal, it was a reckoning, a moment to reflect, adapt, and perhaps, finally, choose the battles worth fighting.